nationalist. And that's not a bad word.
We will launch a new age.
Got a couple Christian nationalism articles to cover here. This first one, Basil.
I got a question for you. Yeah. Do you want to do the order that we have? I've kind of dominated here at the top. Do you want to do yours first?
I actually had it this way for a reason.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you go for it because I had you reading this raw story one. So
that's fine.
go for it.
As long as everybody knows that I'm following your instruction and that I'm not usurping you.
Less talking for me. Usurping. Oh yeah, the usurper. You usurper.
I'm an usurper, apparently. I'm coming for the throne, Gons. Rawstory.com, so you know it's going to be good. Eric Trump. Okay, so first, a little bit of a background. The Christian nationalist topic has become a big topic recently. If, in case you're new to the show, Christian nationalism, an interesting topic for Christians to talk about, and one that we believe deserves some true scrutiny. Let's give it the intellectual and spiritual rigor that it demands, because without proper thought, proper exploration, there's a lot of opportunity for this idea of Christian nationalism to be used as a psyop, to be used against the Christian community and against the country. And so it's in the past couple months has been identified, not by us, but by the mainstream media, that Christian nationalism is this mysterious threat to democracy. We've been hearing about the threats to democracy. Democracy is under threat. And it was just recently that they sort of finally laid it out, that it is Christian nationalism that will bring down America. And as is exemplified here, rawstory.com. Eric Trump comes under fire for claiming his father has done more for Christianity than anyone. Gons. Did you know Trump has done more for Christianity than anyone?
Jared Kushner wants to live forever. Eric Trump is calling dad the super Christian. Mm-hmm. Kind of. You gonna read
He's
it?
the reason Christianity is what it is today, which may be a terrifying concept. Eric Trump, the middle son of a former president, Donald Trump. I love a former president. Yeah, made a curious claim that is sending some Christians to turn their heads. Quote, "There's no one who's done more for Christianity than Donald Trump. No one," said the younger Trump. Wow.
It sounds bad, but little
sounds bad. Let's keep going. Former Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis noted that the video left out that Eric Trump was talking about religious freedom when he said that no one had done more for Christianity. Those viewed as the biggest fighters for religious freedom tend to be the founding fathers, who wrote into the Constitution that Americans could think and believe what they want. The right seems to believe that religious freedom means that churches can do whatever they want, and that right-wing Christianity is more powerful than the government, and religious freedom only applies to Christianity, to the right wing.
I think that's very telling how they're like, how dare they think that right-wing Christianity is more powerful than the government?
You're right. Really shows how the government sort of is their religion.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm almost surprised that they didn't capitalize the word government there. It's a claim that many dispute. No kidding. As first of all, that is, I will just say it out loud, that is an unfair assessment, I think, to say the right thinks that religious freedom thinks churches can do whatever they want, and that right-wing Christianity is more powerful than the government. I mean, yeah, mate, that's like an interesting way to put it.
Spiritual sense, maybe, but this is where it gets hairy. This is where the nuance comes in. Continue.
And religious freedom only applies to Christianity, to the right wing. I don't think anybody actually thinks that, but okay. It's a claim that many dispute, as Jesus Christ is generally considered to have done the most for Christianity since it's named after him. Woo, hot take, raw story.
Also, his name was not Jesus
His last
Christ.
name was not.
Hey, dude, Mr. Christ, we're going to name this thing after you. I mean, hey, you did the most, right? So you're the guy.
My gosh.
I mean, I know what they're saying. I know what they're saying, but still, come on. Be a little more educated, raw
like
story.
Doofuses, though.
I know. They sound ridiculous, but go on.
Jesus H. Christ. Christianity is named after Mr. Christ. Okay, raw story. Quote, no one has done more for Christian nationalism, not for Christianity. That Eric Trump doesn't know the difference is the problem. Oh, I see. Tweeted Baptist pastor George Mason. I don't know this guy. George Mason. It rings a bell. Do we know
There's George Mason University. I don't think it's in reference to them, but
okay.
Yeah, I can check.
Brian Tyler Cohen's podcast account. His podcast account noted that he could think of at least one or two people who did more than Trump. Actor Ken Olin also found the claim absurd. Okay, we're just going through tweets of people now.
Go to the quote where it says, where they quote the scripture there.
The beware of false prophets. Let's see here. Quote, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Jesus said this in his Sermon on the Mount. Some of those commenting on Trump recalled. Cool source. Good source. Others were quick to suggest people like Mother Teresa, who was declared a saint by the Catholic Church in 2003. Another mentioned Pope Francis, who leads the Catholic Church and is said to have divine institutions, supreme, full, immediate, and universal power in the care of souls, according to the Catechism. There were many other options from those online. They all appeared to be people who dedicated their lives to charity, service, and God. See the clip, and then they have the clip there. Ross story, you disappointing bag of garbage.
Okay, so there's that side of the arguments, right? It's a lot of straw manning. It's a lot of trying to sound Christian-esque.
Yeah, right.
But
right. You got to
really
agree with the sentiment, but it's really embarrassing when Ross story does such a horrible job at simply just trying to appear as if they know anything about Christianity.
Yeah. So I'm taking this. This is a town hall article. And so beware, because this is a right leaning. The headline for this one, Gab Founder believes Christian nationalism is viable, not how the left portrays it. And of course, Andrew Torba, who is the founder of Gab, has really been at the center of attention with this conversation, the Christian nationalism thing. And you'll hear why.
Yeah.
Okay, so this
viable. That's an interesting take.
Yeah. Gab CEO Andrew Torba, who founded the social media platform to avoid the censorship of big tech, has a new book out titled Christian Nationalism, a biblical guide for taking dominion and discipling nations. Pretty bold.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
The concept of Christian nationalism has taken a beating in the MSM lately, mainstream media, due to false associations with theocracy and even racism. But Torba doesn't think the phrase has become so damaged that those of us on the Christian right can't use it to describe ourselves and our goals. Interesting. Again, this is written by a pro-Christian nationalist. Torba, who co-authored the book with Minnesota pastor Andrew Isker, explained that he started Gab because he, quote, saw dissenters being silenced, something that we have experienced ourselves. Torba himself has been canceled in many ways. His site has been accused of allowing hateful content, yada, yada, yada. We had the same kind of issues. Torba goes over the history of the U.S., how it was founded as a Christian nation with Christian states, and then parentheses, did you know Maryland's first official religion was Catholicism? In fact, most states had requirements that office holders be Protestant Christians. Okay, sounds kind of theocratic. It was the federal government which was secular. And even then, quote, the point of the Establishment Clause was to retain the distinctive Christian heritage of the American nation, not to destroy it, end quote. He quotes from the book a lot in this article, which is why I'm bringing it. He observes how the definition of Christian nationalism has changed over the years as Catholics have left their church to become Protestants. Mainline Protestants have become non-denominational. Christians have become more independent thinkers, etc. Yeah. Interesting, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know so much about Catholics becoming Protestants, but okay.
Yeah, but generally speaking, I can agree or see that sort of transition. A lot of Christians are more independent thinkers, but okay.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's time for a massive Christian nationalism movement, which is not just political, but also social, cultural, and economic movement, which means involvement, like buying goods and services from Christian businesses. Now, do you see something missing in that list of items there in terms of a movement? And I'll just point it out.
Reveal it to me.
Not a spiritual movement. This is not a spiritual movement. It is political, social, cultural, economic, but not spiritual.
Not spiritual.
Just doesn't mention it. The reason to get involved is to stop allowing, quote, demonization and destruction of the nuclear family and the corruption of our children to happen, which is agreeable. That's an agreeable kind of thing to be a part of. The U.S. is, quote, a Christian nation that has been subverted by a handful of secular ruling class elites that demonize Christians at every turn. End quote. The movement's, quote, primary goal is to build a parallel Christian society, economy, and infrastructure which will fill the vacuum of the failed secular state when it falls. End quote. Now, there's other blogs of leftist people that have taken the book here and were like, the scary things Andrew Torba is saying, which is understandable. He is sort of leaning into. I don't know. I don't know that he's threading the needle as well as a lot of Christians would like to have him do. Torba further explains, quote, we enter the adversary's battleground, Twitter and Facebook, for example, and expect to gain ground on land that the enemy controls where they can wipe us out with a click of a button. We consume news and media that is carefully crafted by the enemy and expect things to change by lending them our time and attention. Something we could echo, this is what I wanted.
That's kind of the point of this show.
I wanted to bring this article because there's a nuance. There's certain things that are like, yeah, agreeable. And there's other parts that are like, I don't know. Torba contends that if you're a Christian, then you're a Christian nationalist. I don't know about that, but that's what he contends. Yeah. He points out how the MSM started using phrases a lot after Donald Trump became president in order to confuse it with white nationalist, and will often use white Christian nationalism. It's just a sneaky way to equate Christians with racism. Another similar tactic they use, which I've previously pointed out, is equating patriotism with a bad form of nationalism, such as that under Nazi Germany. The essence of Christian nationalism is loving your neighbor. Okay, which, again, agreeable, biblical, to love your neighbor. There's nothing wrong with that. Torba hints at an America First mentality, saying we must place interests of those near us over those of foreign nations. And then he goes into, he explains David Chilton once said that freedom cannot be exported to a nation that has no marketplace for the gospel. And of course, he was echoing 2 Corinthians 3:17, which tells us that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Torba says the concept of Christian nationalism is nothing new. Zionism is Jewish nationalism. People are fine with that. So why not Christian nationalism? Thought that was an interesting way to compare.
That's quite the take there. You got to make some leaps and kind of ignore some history to make that. Make that point, don't you?
The other ironic thing is Gab,
especially because the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, is an actual genetic group of people.
It's confusing the ethnic.
It's not a religious.
Yeah,
thing.
It's a the Israel issue is very hairy and messy, and a lot of different viewpoints that make people angry. When others
I just think in general that point is
it's a bad point. It's a very bad point.
Yeah, it's a sort of twisted idea of what Zionism is.
When others call Christians hateful, Torba responds saying it's true Christians hate sin, evil, Satan, and the Antichrist. So good rhetorical retort there. Other accusations Christians face are...
I hate to do this, but you got to point out the Antichrist thing too. As far as the biblical Antichrist, we're supposed to talk as like the spirit of Antichrist.
Right.
Not
which
necessarily
has been there since the beginning kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Other accusations Christians face are also incorrectly phrased, like, quote, you're a racist if you don't hate yourself for the color of your skin. Tolerance isn't a Christian virtue since God doesn't tolerate sin. Okay. Again, sort of conflating the ideas here, which I can understand what they're doing.
This guy is pretty hardcore. I didn't know he was so much this way.
Torba is exasperated that many churches and Christian leaders do little regarding how Christians are treated, even engaging in, quote, a proud endorsement of this madness. He rants, quote, the craven, cowardly leaders of American churches will say they don't want to be political or fight the culture wars, but refusing to fight utter abominations is being political and is fighting the culture wars. But for those on the side of those abominations capitalized, by the way, or capital A, abomination. Catholic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it gets even more, just got to get through this. Catholic integralist Shane Schatzel, who authored the book's prologue, dismisses criticism that Christian nationalism is similar to creating a theocracy. Why a Catholic integralist writing the prologue to his book? I thought that was interesting. He pushes back on nationalism is similar to creating a theocracy or merging church and state. Instead, Christianity supports secularity, which is neutral. He distinguishes this from secularism, quote, wherein religion is expected to keep out politics entirely, and wherever the government advances, religion must retreat, end quote. Accordingly, under Christian nationalism, the state is mandatory and has laws that must be followed, while the church is voluntary, but the church may influence the state. Torba, I'll skip this little thing about...
That seemed like a pretty important point there. Will you read that one again?
Yeah. Accordingly, under Christian nationalism, the state is mandatory and has laws that must be followed, while the church is voluntary, but the church may influence the state.
Huh.
Yeah.
Is he saying this is a good thing, a bad thing, or this is just the state of Christian nationalism?
This is the position of Christian nationalism. So the states must exist, but the church is voluntary, but we can influence the state. Complicated.
Yeah, the government is required, but church is optional.
Now, this is where this will trigger a lot of our producers and listeners out there. Another controversial chapter instructs Christians to stop focusing on eschatology, discussing signs that the second coming and last judgment are close, since Christ currently rules the earth. Now, there are biblical arguments that can be... There are biblical arguments. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. There's some arguments that can be made, but we are awaiting the second coming of Christ, a direct reign of Christ on earth, like a physical reign, right? So for him to say, since Christ currently rules the earth, depends on how you're interpreting some scripture there.
Yeah, well, and there's scripture that sort of blatantly states that the earth is currently under the prince of the power of the air, which is the adversary. Right. And that Christ's return, sort of signals his reign.
Right. So let me read this again because
it's not even necessarily very.
Yeah, I know. You got to really twist
with
some
scripture.
Yeah, you got to twist some stuff to make that statement. But let me read it again because the next part is important. Another controversial chapter instructs Christians to stop focusing on eschatology since Christ currently rules the earth. Instead, he says, churches need to focus on fixing the world now. Now, people familiar with dominionism? That is dominionism. Yeah. The 7 pillars, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Christianity needs to take over the world now for Jesus.
It's not theocracy.
So we will have control when he gets back.
It's not theocracy, but we got to take over everything right now. Otherwise, because, Jesus already rules. So, unfortunately, too many pastors desire the accolades of the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN. They don't want to be lumped in with low-status evangelicals they regard as white MAGA trash, end quote. Overall, the book provides a helpful glimpse into the real Torba, cutting through the smear of caricatures produced by the MSM about him. Which is kind of funny, but it's like you're feeding.
Don't let the media smear him. Let him smear himself here.
I mean, I don't think that this article helps his cause whatsoever. But listening to the details, and again, I haven't read the book, so I'm just speaking from this article. Kind of troubling, a little bit troubling that they want. It's almost like they want Christians to buy the psyop. They want them to because we always talked about how we're already in a spiritual war. The armor of God. All those things are spiritual references, And of course, there is a physical sort of part of that, of course.
Right.
But to be drawn into the dividing lines of American politics in particular is where this screams PSYOP. And it's almost like they refined the Dominionist movement into this more culturally hip anti-culture with Gab and Andrew Torba. And whether, I'm not even questioning this man's faith or his salvation. It's not really about that. It's more about like how he's carrying the message. And I find it very fascinating that it's gone to this place. And something was pointed out to me, and it comes from Revelation 13, which I know we talk about all the time. But in verse 7, it says that the beast was permitted to wage war against the saints and conquer them, which means, basically we lose the war in this context. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, tongue, nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life belonging to the Lamb who was slain. So everybody else is going to worship the beast. And then it says this: he who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, into captivity he will go. If anyone is to die by the sword he must be killed. And I'm wondering, it calls for the perseverance and faith of the saints. I'm wondering if they're talking about the saints who will be like, all right, enough of the, kind of like how, was it Peter right before Jesus got crucified? Yeah. Same kind of deal. Where it's like, right. I got to put an end to this. We got to stop this, and they come up to fight.
Right. So if you like, he's a good, I guess, analog. I'm not trying to set any theology,
right. An example,
dogma here, but you could see Peter as the sort of analog for a Christian nationalist.
Right. Taking things into his own hands. We must change things. We got to stop this now. Sort of.
And was rebuked for it.
Yeah. And also the fact that, if anyone is to die by the sword, that he must be killed, be killed.
Yeah. It's a direct reference to Jesus's response to Peter.
Right. So I just find it fascinating that even in the scriptures and in Revelation, there are references to this sort of pushback against this obvious rise of the Antichrist and its spirit. And
almost like the Christian nationalism that we're seeing rise today, and which this Torba guy is pretty explicitly advocating for.
His book is titled Christian Nationalism, and not in a negative way. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Right. And the fact that he says
so it is written.
Yeah, and the fact that he says don't study eschatology is a big red flag to me. It's like, well, why are you telling us not to?
That's quite the red flag, isn't it?
It's like, why?
Because then you'll read the scripture in Revelation that alludes to Christian nationalists being defeated by the sword. Don't study that.
Don't read that.
Don't read the book of Revelation. All right. You don't want to get confused. Just ignore that. And let's just take over the world for Jesus. For Jesus. Let's do it.
Fight for Jesus. So anyway, I thought the comparison between the Raw story and this one was interesting because you're kind of getting, dare I say, both sides. And there are criticisms to be had from all sides. It feels like, the mainstream will do better, but also, the folks that are really peddling this do better, do better.
People don't even read their Bible, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, the theology he's communicating here, I kind of at best is imprecise.
Yeah.
And not thorough.
Right.
Because again, if you're telling people not to study eschatology and then most advocating
the Christian message is eschatological. The whole thing.
And the hope. Advocating for an ideology or a Christian theology that tells you, not to study like the book referencing current events in the world is a little wackadoodle. But you know what? The very passionate Christian nationalists, it's about time that they had an opportunity to spend some money on a book that is positive about their movement.
Yeah.
And I don't like to nitpick at people's motivations, but I will say there is an eager and willing audience who is ready to and enthusiastic about getting a book that sort of supports this. And that book is not the Bible. Hate to say it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.